From here, I'll go back to the drawing. The next thing I'll do is I'm going to make this cutout right here. You can see it in this view, and then I'm going to use the dimensions in this view to define the sketch that I'm going to use to cut it out. I'm going to go back to SOLIDWORKS, and this time I'm going to create the sketch on the right side plane. So starting the sketch on the right side plane, and I'll look normal to it. I'm going to draw in a vertical center line. I want this vertical center line to be coincident with the origin. And then I'm going to activate the dynamic mirror tool. Under Tools, select the drop down menu for Tools, Sketch Tools, Dynamic Mirror. It's asking me to select the line or linear model edge. This time I'll select the line. You can see by these symbols that I am in a dynamic mirror tool. I'll use the line tool and I'll sketch out the profile of this cut. The first point I locked onto the origin. The second point I'm going to lock onto this end point. I'll draw in an angled segment, and then I'll draw in a horizontal line that's coincident with the vertical center line. I'll hit escape to exit the line tool, and now if I grab this end point, you can see that everything is symmetric about this vertical center line. I can now use the Smart Dimension tool. The distance from this edge to this edge is 0.6. And then the angle from this edge to this line is going to be 60 degrees. I'll exit the Dimension tool, and you can see that my sketch is completely defined. From here I'll go to the Features tab. I'm going to use the Extruded Cut tool. I'll tumble my view so I can see what's happening with the cut. I want this cut to go through the entire part, so for direction 1 I'll select through all both. The preview looks correct. I'll select OK, and I'll save my work. The next thing I'll do, I'm going to make this hole, I'm going to create this 0.562 diameter hole that goes through the part. I'll look at my part from a default isometric view. I'm going to use the right plane again. I'll start a new sketch in the right plane. I'll look normal to it. And I'm going to start by drawing in a circle. I want that circle's center point to be in line with the origin. So I don't want it to be coincident with the origin. I want it to be in line with the origin. I'll dimension that circle at 0.562. I'll dimension the circle from the top edge to the center, 1.35. That information is coming from this dimension on the blueprint. I'll exit the Dimension tool. To align the center point with the origin, I can select the center point. I can hold my Shift key down and then select the origin. And I'm going to apply a vertical relation, and that will lock it into place left to right. From here I'll select OK. I'll look at my part from a default isometric view, and from here I'll go to the Features tab. I'll use the Extruded Cut tool, and I want that extruded cut to go through, I want it to go through both. The preview looks correct. I'll select OK. Everything looks to be correct. I'll look at it from a default isometric view, and I'll save my work. From here, I'll go back to the drawing. I'm going to make the cut that hollows out the piston. I'm going to reference this view on the bottom left and this view, section AA, to get the information that I need to make this cutout. I'll go back into SOLIDWORKS, and I'm going to tumble my view so that I can see this bottom face. I'm going to create the sketch on this surface right here. So position my cursor over the surface, right click, sketch, and then I'll hit the space bar and look normal to the sketch plane. I'll click off of the part to deselect that face. And I'm going to start by offsetting some geometry inboard a distance equal to the wall thickness. I'm looking at section AA. The wall thickness is 0.125 here, here. So what I'll do, I'm going to offset this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge inboard a distance of 0.125. I might have to do it in several steps. Let's see how this tool works. If I go to Sketch, Offset Entities, set your offset distance to 0.125, and I'll start by selecting this edge right here. Then I'll click Inboard to offset it to the inside. If I select the dimension, I can access the parameters and change it to a 3 decimal place dimension. I'm now going to offset this edge inboard, a distance equal to 0.125. So offset entities, 0.125. I'll select this edge and then select inside. I'm now going to offset this edge, the one that expands the entire length of the part, and this edge. So offset entities, 0.125. I'll select this edge. It's offsetting inboard. That's correct. I'll select OK. And now I'll offset this edge. I don't want that to be offset inboard. From here, I'll change the decimal places of these dimensions. 3 decimal places. I'll do the same thing over here. It's not necessary, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to clean up these overlapping entities. So I'll use the trim tool, power trim, and whatever I drag my cursor over gets trimmed back. And I'm zooming in and out. A little bit easier to select things that way. Zoom in here, and I trim back those entities, those overlapping entities. I'll select OK. I'm going to draw in a vertical and horizontal center line, both being coincident with the origin. So in this case, I'll draw in the horizontal, and then I'll draw in a vertical. Both are coincident with the origin. I'll now draw in 4 lines. Those lines will represent this edge, and then this edge and this edge. We're basically going to create 9 regions within this sketch that we're going to use to define the areas that we're going to make the cut with. I'll draw in 2 vertical lines. I want the endpoint to be coincident with this edge, and then vertical and coincident with this edge. Hit the escape key to exit the tool. I'll go back to the line tool. Coincident with this edge, and then vertical and coincident with this edge. I want this line and this line to be symmetric about the center line, so I select all 3, and then I apply the symmetric relation. I can use the Smart Dimension tool to define the width. The distance from this edge to this edge is 0.525. So 0.525. I'll change it to a 3 decimal place dimension, and then I'll select OK. I now need to draw in lines that represent this edge and this edge. the spacing between them will be 1 inch, and they will need to be symmetric about that horizontal center line. So coincident with this edge, horizontal and coincident with this edge. Then I'll create another one. Coincident with this edge, horizontal, and coincident with this edge. This line, holding the shift key down, select this line and the horizontal center line. Make them symmetric. And then I can dimension it 1 inch wide. And then I'll select OK to exit the dimension tool. If I tumble my view, I've created 9 regions, and I'm going to use 7 of them to define the area that I'm going to remove from the piston. I'll go to the Features tab, Extruded Cut. Because I have multiple regions, Selected Contours becomes available. And then what I can do is I can select inside of the areas that I need to remove from the piston. For the depth of this cut, I'll reference this view. The dimension is 2 inches. So for the depth, 2. The preview looks to be correct. I'll select OK. And I've removed the majority of the material from the inside of this piston. From here, I'll look at it from a default isometric view, and I'll save my work. Now that I've removed the material from the inside of the piston, I need to thicken up the wall a little bit here on this edge and on this edge. If I go back to the drawing and I zoom into this view, you can see that the wall thickness changes here and here. And this is to allow for these grooves that are cut right here. If you were to cut these grooves without thickening up the wall here, you're going to cut through the wall. So we're going to add an 1/8 inch thickness to the wall. That thickness is going to start 1.5 inches into the part from this edge, and then it's going to continue on to this edge. So I'll go back to SolidWorks, and I'm going to create a sketch on this face right here. This is where the dimensions are being pulled from. So I'm going to start by creating a sketch on this face. Deselect the face by selecting, clicking off of the part. And I'm going to convert entities on this face right here. So I'm in a sketch. From the Sketch tab, I'm going to select Convert Entities. And I'll select this face here. I'll select OK. And you can see that there are arcs and lines converted on all the edges of that face. The next thing I'll do, I'm going to offset this edge inboard 0.125, and then I'll offset this edge inboard 0.125. Go to the Sketch tool, Offset Entities, Offset Distance 0.125. I'll select this line, or I'll select this edge, and then I'll click Inboard. I can drag the dimension off. I'll change it to a 3 decimal place dimension. I'll now offset this edge inboard 0.125. So offset entities, offset distance 0.125. I'll select this edge and then select inboard. I can change the dimension, 3 place decimal. Now if I zoom in here, I want to extend this line so that it is either coincident with this edge or overlaps. If I grab the endpoint and drag it, let me do it there. And I'm going to work my way around and see if I can drag it over. I'll start by dragging them over, and then I'm going to go back and trim them. Alright, so then I'll go to Trim, Power Trim. I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to clean up these overlapping entities. Now I've got the two regions that I need to thicken up the walls. So this region and this region I'm going to create the extrusion with. I'm going to go to the Features tab, Extruded Boss Base. For the selected contours, I'll select inside of this region, and then I'll select inside of this region. I'll tumble my view. And for starters, it's going in the wrong direction, so I'll flip the direction. I want this extrusion to start 1.5 inches into the part. So I'm going to go to the parameters for the boss extrude. I'm going to change the from to offset and set the offset distance to 1.5. For direction 1, I want the offset to go back into the part, so I'll change, nope, that didn't work. Under the from, I want the offset to go the other direction, so I'll select this icon to flip the direction. You can now see the beginning of the extrusion. Here's the end of the arrow. The beginning of the extrusion is 1.5 inches from the sketch plane. I want the extrusion to stop at this surface right here. So I'll go to direction 1 and I'll change it to up to next. So the extrusion starts 1.5 inches off of this face, and then it stops when it comes into contact with the top face of the inside of the piston. I'll select OK. You can now see that we've got the wall thickness increased here and increased here. From here, I'll look at it from a default isometric view, and I'll save my work.